If you've seen my last video, you would know that this game kind of drove me insane. I actually have removed most of the extra footage. I will put a lot of the moments where I start beating my head against the wall as a little compilation at the end, but for now, let's just go through the game. It starts off real simple, set up for the sun rotation. Push the pawn to develop the queen and bishop in the safest way possible. Sun comes out for orbits. That's a mistake. Pawn moves. There's several different follow-ups here. The one that I do in the game is actually with this flare. But also options for simply getting your other son into the game immediately with a massive threat that can only be stopped that way. Or simply following up immediately, which would transpose into what happened later in the game. At that point, you can either orbit this piece here for follow-up, or this piece here for follow-up. Either one works, and this would just transpose into what happened in the actual game. Now, in the game, this was here, that pawn was pushed, another mistake. Sun here to threaten, pawn back, this flare forward, and again you could also orbit this one in to try to be a little bit more aggressive with this. But that one was pushed, flare there, and now there are several options. As you can see, I am threatening to either gain this rook for free by moving this flare in, threatening the queen. Queen has to escape, and in that case I would just be picking up a free pawn. Or, much more dangerous, moving my flare in here with check. If queen captures, sun captures queen, I trade a flare for the queen. Or, if king just moves out of the way, I would capture this rook. So it's very dangerous. Best move here is actually to move the knight in the way, so that after flare captures, bishop captures, queen captures, the rooks are mutually protecting each other and nothing else is open. Or the rook and the queen. But that's not what happened in the game. You can also look at this line real quick. It transposes pretty well into the rook just dying. The better move here is actually just to take the queen, move it out of danger, and again, everything is mostly fine. The only piece that's even threatened right now is this pawn, which has a number of possible follow-ups. Probably best move here would be something like flare back. Well, there's a bishop there, so let's not do that. It's funny. White actually doesn't have that many good moves here. But back to what actually happened in the game. The worst of the three moves, pawn forward. Now, there's a number of ways to deal with this. What happened in the actual game was flare here, but you could also move this queen out to deal with this open line, in which case either this pawn needs to be pushed forward, or this knight needs to be moved in the way. If you just capitalize on the fact, which I missed, that this threat is still here, then after flare in, you either capture with the queen and the queen dies, or the king moves and the rook dies. Either way, it's a bad position. But I missed that in the game, so flare came in, bishop capture, flare capture, queen over to protect itself and threaten the flare. Sun protects flare, knight moves in the way, and I orbit the other flare in. Now, you could argue that this is a mistake. I don't think so. Because you would be lessening your development with very little reason for having pushed this deep. There are tons of squares of influence for these flares all over the enemy board. And here, the pawn is pushed forward. Best move. Now, again, there are multiple follow-ups. This one actually has several possible lines which look like mate, but they don't work. Best move is pawn capture, then flare moves in, and here it looks bad, but It only ends poorly if you think you can do something like queen capture and then you just, die. So queen can't capture that flare. Pawn push is similarly poor. After flare, pawn, flare, pawn and bishop can both follow up with this, but apparently I missed that. So king here, queen dies, king here. And it ends up really well for white with a little mate, but it's not accurate. This can be stopped without just moving the king in ways that reinforce the defense and develop. And B, way back here, again, the bishop and the pawn could kill the flare. It's not that big a deal. So, pushing the pawn is a good move here, but the best move is actually to move this knight in. Moving this knight back does something similar, but it doesn't leave this flare hanging. So after pawn here, this queen is under threat, so everything after this has to either threaten the enemy queen or the enemy king or move this out of danger. Those are the only 3 lines due to danger levels. And the only reason this doesn't work and mate is because this pawn here can capture backward in this older version of the game. And this is a poor result. So, because of that, you cannot move the queen in. Another really good move that wasn't played is to actually orbit this in and transpose, sacrificing a flare in order to maintain this hold in the center and the pressure. Still with ideas of going after this square, orbiting into this square, and getting into this square. But, again, that didn't happen. I actually didn't see that until way later. Best line is this. Or the best line that was even considered and played. With that, knight back, son in, trying to transpose a little bit. And after knight captures, you have a couple options. One, orbiting this flare in, which doesn't do as much as you would hope. Even something as simple as yeah, this actually is a really good move. Because essentially this knight is going to die. And however it dies, it opens up the sun to come in and mess things up. Probably better lines involve something like sun over, bishop over, but here, best move is flare captures, but what was played is sun captures. After sun captures, queen captures, flare captures. Knight here in order to prevent, but king here is playable. It's just that you still have very little development, and this is coming. And would be coming with check and a threat on the enemy rook. So, in the game, knight was played. There are several options, either A, to protect the flare directly with a sun movement, or, what I think is the best move, to just rotate the flare in any way, let it die. That's a terrible move. Again, I'm an idiot, but we'll go with it. Flare here, or sun here, sun, several options for pawn movements, this one being the better one. And this results in a little bit of a dance. The rook dies, king back. And after here, this is just very, very winning for white. However, there were several branches along that path. At the end of the day, the really complicated part of this game is in the middle here, trying to look at all of the different options for attacking. Orbiting the flare in doesn't work, so you have to push the sun. This pawn push, other than this one, doesn't work, despite the fact that it looks better, because after this, I did it again. I forgot to mention the problem Every single time. I miss it every single time. Here, let me get to the point. The problem with this line, this is check. How many times do I have to miss this during a review? This has happened 3 separate times when I'm recording and talking about this game. 3 times! It's fine. It's fine. You'll see my other times during the compilation. Queen capture, rook capture, queen back, rook, king forward. The queen has to back up again and find a way to orbit the other 2 flares in, and the opponent still has 2 rooks, a bishop, and a knight, and this is playable. But, pawn forward, queen, rook, king, flare, pawn, flare, king, rook, flare. You can also move this flare here, but I don't recommend it really. Again, best move is probably just to take the rook. You're up in material anyway, so you can afford the down trade. And it ends up happening anyway. With orbits in. Took a while to find it, but this is still winning for white. At the end of the day, at all of this, with however black plays, as long as white doesn't blunder, white wins. Which this is just inspired several times. The attack is pushed in a way to get the king out, and then also put the sun in a position to orbit in. However you move through, it ends up with a mate. Flare covers this square, flare covers these square, queen covers these squares, and it is over. Now, I am hopped up on coffee. I have deleted several terrible blunder lines because I wasn't perfect in reviewing this game. That is a simple matter of my personal strength not being up to par. But I'm happy with the end of this, even if it took me so long to get to this point. What the fuck? How did that happen? I remember reading this. Oh, I see. Oh dear. Oh boy, oh dear. You know what? This is the part where I record one full front-to-back game with no mistakes. Queen out with check. Boom. Finally capable of an orbit in with tempo. Wait a sec. Fuck! Alright. Finally fixed it from the top. Checkmate. Unfortunately, much of that footage was deleted because of shit like that. That was, those were the parts I kept. But, well, you know the rules. This is the other half of the recording that made me lose my mind, so any time that I almost lose my mind making one of these videos, even, you subscribe if you're not, odd, you unsubscribe. It's a 12, please subscribe. If you don't believe me, just... I need a mirror or something. Ah! Yeah, you can't see that, never mind. Fuck me. It's also kind of tradition that this portion of the video is a little bit unprofessional. At 100 subscribers... I love how I said traditional, I've only done it once. Anyways, at 100 subscribers I want to do something special. If you have any ideas, let me know in the comments down below. I was supposed to do this at some point, but whatever.